So welcome again, guys. This is the fourth of a series, Bill, by the way, of our Psychiatrist Month. And it's the first time we've had a theme. And to be honest, I very much have enjoyed it and have learned a tremendous amount. So we had Dr. Bob on for two of the sessions, and one with myself and him, and then one Greg and I did on relapse. And it was in that one, it was everyone went around and talked what they thought. It's rather than a singular type of presentation. And so we have Bill Pettit, who has really carried the psychiatrist mold in the three principles for years and years. He was really the only one, in my opinion, who had a really deep understanding of that. And he is in London. He presented about 4 or 5 times, some with his wife as well, who's really sweet. I really like her. And they present well together. They're kind of like a little bit different energy, and it works out really well. Bill, I'm not going to introduce, most people know you anyway, but one of the things I want to start with Bill, even though I didn't mention it in my email, is one of the most important things that I've seen in my training and teaching is bringing Sid along in the journey. And you're one of the few 3P people that I would have to say really does that as well, which, by the way, means deep respect for me. And could you please, I've emphasized that on the show, but could you, in your own perspective, see how bringing Sid along in the teachings of the 3 principles as it applies to whatever it is you're doing is important? Because I still feel people don't quite get that.
Sure. I'm curious. Let me ask a question first. Harry, when you said Dr. Bob and presented for 2, who was Dr. Bob?
Solomon.
Oh, Dr. Bob. Oh, good. Wonderful.
Yeah, him and I, we had a really good time on the show. And
wonderful.
And also he did a show with just Greg, because I was traveling, got lost in the airplane flights and stuff. And that was also excellent. And he, personally, I thought he was fantastic.
Wonderful. Yeah, Bob is he's just a really fine man, fine psychiatrist, and I'm sure he told you in recent years came back to really wanting to have a deeper understanding of the principles, and it's been on a wonderful journey. To me, what Harry talked about as far as going back to Sid. To me, it's not like rocket science, I mean, if I, and to tie cleverly in rocket science and physics, if I was interested in learning more about relativity, and was a physicist, I would not start my journey with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation physicists who had learned from Einstein. I would go back to Einstein's 1905 papers as a physicist, and I would read them and read them and read them. And when I felt I had a sense, and I'd reflect and I'd listen and I'd get quiet, and when I felt that I had a sense of what he had seen, I would move on to see if anybody else had seen something with that wonderful standing on the shoulders of Einstein, if they had insights even beyond what he had. But I would go back to where it began, to where some human being was allowed a peek into, to me, the mind of God. Whatever if you don't like God, then the mind of whatever was there before the Big Bang. I call that divine mind. If people feel more comfortable with universal mind, I have no problem. If they need to call it Curly, Moe, or Larry, I have no problem, because it's still the same. The labels we put on things does not change the nature of what it is. So I'll just echo. I mean, whether I'm teaching a psychiatrist, and there are psychiatrists starting to get interested in the field that I'm either in the process of or have taken them through the missing link, page by page. Easily read little book, huh? That is so, for those of you that don't know it, it's so powerful and compact that you'll notice that there's not even prose. It's not written in prose. It's written 2 or 3 sentences at a time with huge spaces in between. So you've got a chance to see between the spaces, you know, between the spaces of the film. And I had one experience with the missing link that we went through with a psychiatrist from and I'll just say one of the meccas, one of the psychiatric meccas in the United States. And he and I had gotten befriended after I listened to him speak. And he's an internationally known specialist in resilience and in PTSD. And so we went through the missing link over about 10 or 12 sessions, 55-minute, 60-minute meetings. We went through the missing link. And then he was going to give a speech at an international meeting. And he 30-minute speech, and he said, "Do you mind if I share with you my speech?" And I said, "Of course not." And so we finished the speech, and this is after we had gone through the missing link, shortly after, in 10 or 12 sessions. And he said, what do you think of my speech? And I said, I think it was beautiful. I'll call him Joe. We'll just make up a name here. I said, "Joe, I thought it was really beautiful speech, but there's about at least 3 times, if not 4, that I felt like you didn't make the bridge between your thoughts. You didn't connect with what you were saying. It seemed like you were suddenly, there was no bridge, and it was a little bit disorienting." And he said, "Well, can you give me examples?" And so I gave him the 3 examples, and I shared with him what the bridge was, Harry. And he was dumbfounded. He said, "Oh my God." And this is not bragging me, because he said, "Mo, that's perfect. Those are perfect." He said, "Can I use them?" And I said, "Of course you can. That's why I shared them with you." He said, Where did this come from?" And I said, "Well, right now it came from within me, because it's what I see. But it originally came from," and I'll make up the pages, for page 48, page 93, and page 112, from that book that we just went through, one page at a time, The Missing Link. And he went, "Oh my God." Maybe we should read that again. Because we were planning on going through Second Chance next. And I said, "Well, that's fine." So the next 4 sessions, in 4 hours, we covered the first 6 pages of Sydney Banks's The Missing Link. In 4 hours, we covered 6 pages. I see Greg nodding his head. He's
That's
had
a powerful book.
That
really is.
And Mark, yeah. So and The Enlightened Gardener is wonderful, and oftentimes because some people like a story. When I was in private practice, I used to offer people either The Missing Link or The Enlightened Gardener, and I'd loan it to them, and then if they came back, and they'd take one of them, and if they wanted to purchase, they could, or they could return it. Actually, when I was in private practice in Aberdeen, South Dakota, from 1994 to 2002, before I went to teach at the medical school at West Virginia, where the Sydney Banks Institute was. I used to have about a 4-week waiting list to people to come in to see me, because the word got out that people were actually being helped back to their mental well-being, regardless of the labels that they had been given. By the way, for everybody that doesn't know, the label that any professional puts on you is some attempt to describe where they see where you are. It has nothing to do with who you are. It describes where you are. Who you are is divine energy in disguise.
That's real important key for all of us to see. If you see that in who you're talking to, you'll never have a problem connecting with that person.
Absolutely, Harry. Absolutely. And people know when you see it, because hope awakens. I've had people that, we were talking about the missing link, and I got off there. Do you remember? I don't know if there was anything else about the missing link. Just go ahead.
No, just so one of the things I want to emphasize, this show is about, for all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who watch it after. So participate, eh? The more we bring it alive, Bill will enjoy it 1,000 times more, and also the people who are listening to it will enjoy it 1,000 times.
Absolutely. I have no need to, once you get me started, you might sometimes have to give me the signal, but I have no problem listening and just knowing that the wisdom that we talk about is universal. Every one of us is in the very first chapter, all human psyches are rooted in universal truth, and no person's psyche is better than any other's. Only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. That's from the first chapter. And when Sid wants you to really listen, he puts things in italics. Like, okay, wake up a little more. And at the end of the second chapter, everyone, those are bold statements, everyone in the world. Sometimes if I have a client, like I had one recently that had been depressed for 43 years, and he's fine now, and he's having a really wonderful life, and we'll name him, I'm going to make up a name, Jonathan Peterson. I'm just making that name up. So when I read this book, I went, oh my gosh, I never noticed this before. It was my turn to read on that page, or he read, because I take turns. He read this, what I'm going to read, and I said, my gosh, I never noticed this before, Jonathan. I have a different edition than you do. And he said, well, what is here's what it says. It takes a whole side of a page. Everyone in the world shares the same innate source of wisdom, but it is hidden by the tangle of our own misguided personal thoughts. And he said, well, what does yours read? I said, mine, I never noticed. I apologize. Mine says, everyone in this world except Jonathan Peterson shares the same innate source of wisdom. I never realized you were the exception. I am so sorry. This is a waste of our time. And of course he starts laughing. He says, that doesn't say that, does it? And I said, no, it doesn't. Right? Because we all think we're the exception. Yeah, that's fine. It should have said everybody except Bill Pettit shares the same innate source of wisdom. Well, it's just not true. There's no exceptions. So let me listen.
And I have everybody muted just to cut back on background noise. So if you'd like to, ask a question or share an insight or something, please feel free to either unmute yourself, or in the participants tab, you can click the raise hand feature and we'll get you worked in. We definitely want this to be a conversation. We're all equal in this thing.
Well, we've got Paul over here.
Okay, great. Hi, Bill. Hi, everybody. Bill, just the other day, someone very near and dear to me, a young woman who'd had a sexual assault experience years ago, shared with me that her therapist had, she really has a strong identity now as someone with PTSD. Mm-hmm. And the therapist, I guess, has had that experience. And, what this young woman shared with me was that this is a lifelong thing. It will always be with me. It will always be there for me to be aware of. And I'm going to need to be, and my alarm bells were just going off. And yeah. I'm relatively new to this understanding. I'm just getting grounding, going. And I want to resist the urge to come in and try to fix or talk about it too much, because I see how destructive that is when people talk about it that don't have the language and the grounded understanding themselves. But wonder if you have any thoughts for me about what I might point her toward that could help her to start to find, another perspective.
Yeah. Paul, the first thing I'm going to address before I do that is to address kind of what you just said, because you made about teaching, about trying to teach somebody this. But I'm going to make 2 points. One of them is what we've all, I think most of us, and I think Harry would be the first to say this too, and Greg and everybody here, that you can't teach if you don't have a student. You make a big mistake if you teach before you have a student.
Yeah, that's the key, a big point. You not only waste your time, you're going to hurt yourself.
Right. And Sid on the Long Beach tapes, this fellow says, after 10 years, he'd been coming to hear Sid. And he said, I finally heard you today, Sid. He said, why didn't you say this before? Sid says, I've been saying the same thing for 10 years. It's just that today you heard it. He says, well, why weren't you more insistent and insist that I heard you? He said, yeah, right. I've tried that. That doesn't work real well. Right. So the first point is, what are we talking about? We're talking about rapport. One of my favorite sayings, Paul, is that people do not care what you know until they know that you care.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah. That's really, really profound.
I used to, when I headed up an adolescent unit, I tried to do my best at the level of understanding I was at 25 years ago or 23 years ago. I'd say these young people want to be at peace as much as you and I do.
Yeah.
They've had enough adults waving their big finger at them.
Right.
It's not that they're resistant. It's not, they want to learn, but they need to know that you care first. That's the first thing they need to know. And then once they know that you care, they will listen. They will give you at least an opening chance to talk to them. And if they get that, number one, you care, that's before anything, then you've got a student. The sign that comes in my brain is little birdies when the mother's got the worm, and to me, once a hope gets awakened, people become like little birdies. Now, the second thing is, if when you speak, and they're not going to give you, especially adolescents, they're not going to give you a long time, but they'll give you sufficient time to where their truth meter either goes, this person knows something, even if I don't understand it intellectually, my truth meter is on truth. Mm. On the other hand, especially with adolescents, if their truth meter goes to bullshit side, you might as well pack up your bags and go to another town. Right. Because they have some of the sharpest bullshit meters in the world, right?
Yeah.
But if you show that you care and they hear truth, even if they don't. When I first heard Sid Banks, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But I knew that my truth meter was solidly on truth. My intellect was having a big problem. But that's not where the answers are. They're not in the personal mind. They're beyond that in the universal mind and our connection to it. So those are two things that I would say even beforehand. The third thing is, Sid would say, and my wonderful wife, Dr. Linda, who Pettit, who's just speaks with a clarity that I admire. And she's had 13 years and I've had 34 years. And I'm just a slow learner in a lot of ways, but I love to listen to her speak because it's so clear. And she is apt to say, I probably lost my train of thought here. Oh, she remembers a conversation with Sid when she first started to learn this 13 years ago. And she said, Sid, I just am reluctant to try to teach this because I don't know that I know enough yet. And Sid says, oh, dearie, it doesn't take that much. It
we're
doesn't.
We're proof of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're proof of that. It doesn't take that much. If you speak from what you know to be true, and you stick to that, you will be amazed. You will be amazed at the results that happen, because you're speaking from universal truth, and it's going to touch the wisdom and the truth inside the person you're speaking with. And they may, and Linda would say, and I have too, had many instances where that person that I was teaching jumped ahead of me. Mm. Because it's the same wisdom. And as long as you're speaking from that wisdom, you will touch that wisdom. And the first thing that happens is that hope gets awakened. I remember a woman who was sent to me who's through, because I've been a Navy flight surgeon for a commander of a wing during Vietnam era in a training wing, not overseas. And he told me that I was the best flight surgeon he'd had out of 25 in 30 years. And he sent to me a relative that had been, through him, I got sent a relative that had been in the Harvard and Mass General and been declared totally mentally disabled after 4.5 years of working. And to make a long story short, she got well, and she got really well, and had a beautiful, last I heard, she had a beautiful marriage and 3 little boys, and it was grateful. And she had been declared totally mentally disabled, and her family had been told that she'd be in and out of hospitals the rest of her life with diagnoses of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, anorexia nervosa, and God knows what. Other than that, they thought she was pretty healthy. Right. That's supposed to be a joke. I'm like Mark Howard. You know you're in trouble when you have to label your jokes. Yeah. So, but he told me, she said, when I saw her a year later, and she went, because she hadn't been able to function for 4.5 years, she went back to college a year after I saw her for 8.5 days. And she graduated 4 years later with a 4.0 in mathematics and got her master's degree at Columbia in occupational therapy. And I said to her at that first time I saw her, she came down for a 3-day refresher before she went off to college. And I said, what happened a year ago when I saw you? What changed? She said, well, you know, I was pretty hopeless that I could ever, and I'd been told that I was broken and I was lacking. And your certainty, and the certainty came from what Harry's talking about. I looked and saw a spiritual being who was perfectly mentally healthy, but that for what she was doing with God's gift of thought. Yeah. And her belief in the content that she was her computer brain was spitting out. And so a year later, she told me, your certainty, when you looked at me and said to, and I'll call her Betty, wasn't Betty, of course it was a more generational, but I said, Betty, you are perfectly mentally healthy. You just don't know it. You've been innocently using the gift of thought and taking yourself away from this. And it's caused incredible biochemical dysregulation, genes been turned on and off that shouldn't be turned on and off. And it's manifested in what you call your illness and all these labels. But that's not who you are. Perfectly mentally healthy. She said, there was a place in me that first thought was, my God, this psychiatrist is crazy. And the second thought came from a different place. And she said, I knew that what you had just said was absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah. So as far as if you get, one of the things I'll do for you and anybody else, or I could just send it to Harry if you'd like. I don't know if you've, on YouTube, I think it is. I know it's might be under Judy Sedgman and I. There's a 2-part thing at Florida universities that's on PTSD. Mm. It talks about a woman named Nicole Satrangi, and I use her name because Nicole wrote a 3-page testimony of her story, and she made one provision of me sharing it if I shared her name. She said, you have to share my name. Not you have to keep me anonymous. Yeah. You have to share my name. And she had been raped and brutally beaten and held captive for 8 hours by a Massachusetts patrolman. And it was on CNN and all that back in the 90s. And after that, she was 23 at the time, and or 27 at the time. The next 9 years, she had 23 hospitalizations. She saw the most famous traumatologist in Boston and at a huge national center in Morgantown. And they had told her she was broken. And so she went to drugs and alcohol to try to relieve the pain of being broken. And within 18 months, she was off all medication. And she spent 4.5 beautiful years with her mother until she was tragically killed by a drunk driver that went through a stop sign. But her mother called me that morning, as grief-stricken as she was, saying, as grief as I am right now, I can't tell you how much I am filled with gratitude that I had 4.5 years that I would have never dreamt I was going to have with my daughter after 9 years of hell. When every time she went out the door, I wondered if she would come back alive. She one time left a hospitalization with 19 prescriptions for psychotropic medications.
Wow.
So there's a beautiful testimony by her that I would be glad to send Harry. Would that be okay, Harry? And then you could...
Bill,
yes.
Send it to Greg, and he'll post it in the room. He's better at that than I am. Okay.
Greg, I'll do that, okay? Do you have it already? Do you have Nicole Satrangi?
I know I've watched it.
Okay.
If you have easy access to the link, that would be great.
I'm going to send the testimony. Yeah, the other one is on YouTube or Vimeo, the two half-hour programs where we actually sat with her mother after, it was years after, we sat with her mother, and she showed Nicole's picture, beautiful young woman, graduated from college, and we talked for two different sessions on the TV show. We talked about PTSD. So is that helpful, Paul?
Yeah, it's very helpful. And, the conditions you described, they all fit this. She's a brand new, fresh honors psychology graduate at UC Berkeley.
Right.
Deeply curious and loving person. And actually, she wants to go on for a doctorate and become a therapist. And I've really wanted to turn her onto this whole understanding as just information for her to have in her process. And so, that feels like exactly the kind of idea that I was hoping to hear, Bill.
Okay.
Can I say something now, Bill? Just
absolutely, Harry. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that you'll notice with Bill is that he's extremely good at interacting with people and finding out where is the common thread between the two of us in to create the launch to talk all that things that he talked about, which is what he started off with. And that is something really, really important. Bill alluded to this, you have to see the spiritual essence in yourself and in the other person. If you don't have that, you're going to miss it anyway. Even if you connect, it's not much good, or it's so far. But the other thing that you want to understand is you're a dancer. You're dancing around. Mark and I go into a recovery room at a center, and one of the things that is interesting for him to see is how I start the class. And the class always starts different. And I'm trying to explain to him that I actually have no idea how I'm starting. I'm just trying to find a common thread that will launch the class, because once we have one question in our class, it's off. And it takes on its own special flavor. And each class is different. He's starting to get the idea that there isn't really a can that we're doing. We're just, and that when you look at Bill, that's one of the things he brings. He's not a can. He's a unique individual with a million stories. And he could talk to you from any angle you want. And he's engaging. So you Mark is totally different than me. So he'll have a whole different way of doing it. But you find your way. And within that, you have to remember at the beginning, you're dancing. You don't have a idea and this is what they need and all that stuff. And when the rest of it comes, then that's what Sid means. It's coming from your innate wisdom, because it will just take off. And you're not looking for what you can tell people. You're looking for the collective consciousness. It's not you and him or you and her. It's us and where we go together. And when you keep it like that, then you'll be succulent.
I appreciate that kind of input. I mean, part of where I'm at in this very young phase of my relationship with the principles is, as a former university teacher, as a former public speaker, I'm used to that, delivering out content with structure. And this is so far other end of the spectrum from that. I get that there's no power in what I know, and there's no power in what I can tell someone else. It's what I can, whatever can subtly invite them to their own understanding is what really feels, juicy to me. And it's learning a whole new way of being, really, but what I do have going for me is that in the case of this young woman, she has complete innate wellness. She just doesn't think she does, because she's been convinced otherwise by an expert. And so that's that.
In my experience, it seems to be much easier to get through to people who are in pain like that, because they're willing to change where they currently are. And when I first started sharing this, I kind of came up with that whole elevator speech, and trying to have some kind of canned spiel that I had to tell people. And there were people I worked with for months, and they never saw anything. And then there was one time in particular, I went into a grocery store I hardly ever go into, and the cashier just looked frustrated and like she was having this terrible day. And I just said, "Hey, how are you today?" And she's like, "Oh, it's just probably one of the worst days of my life." And I really can't remember exactly what I said to her, but it was just a quick one-liner about something about how we're creating our own experience.
Yeah. And
then I paid and went about my way, and I went back to that store maybe a month and a half later and saw the same person, and she came running from the cash register when she saw me and thanked me for what I said. And I couldn't even remember what I said. And it was seriously like 2 seconds. It was just a quick sentence that came out of my mouth, and it somehow got through to her.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, there's other people where I dumped 1,000 words on them, and nothing really worked. It's about the feeling.
I'm starting to get the sense that where the power is carried on the feeling and not in the words. They're almost separate from the word. I realize that may be an overreactive move the other direction, but I'm trying to come into some relationship with the balance between words and feeling as I'm in this.
It's that's a powerful insight, Paul, because it is in the feeling. It's being in the present with a loving, lighthearted, joyful feeling.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes of Sid's, I believe it's in the Enlightened Gardener Revisited. He says, "Mental stress and distress is to mental illness as damp and dark is to fungus. It makes it grow." I'll say that again. Mental stress and distress is to mental illness as damp and dark is to fungus.
Wow.
It makes it grow. On the other hand, he says, love and lightheartedness is to mental illness as sunlight and dry is to fungus.
Mm.
It eradicates it.
Mm.
It eradicates it. I had a woman who, as I closed my practice in Michigan on one of the last days in the clinic, I worked 2 days a week at a federally qualified clinic for the less fortunate. And she said to me, Dr. Pettit, she just looked radiant. She was in her late 30s. And I looked back at her records and I saw all the labels of diagnoses that she had carried. And I said, you look absolutely beautiful. And she knew that there was no sexual overtones or inappropriateness or wonderful. I might have said wonderful. She said, Doctor, I feel wonderful. When I came to you, I don't know, 9 months ago, my list of labels where had been told, like this person, the best you can become is to move from a PTS victim to a PTS survivor. But I also had depression. I had generalized anxiety. I had panic attacks. I had an eating disorder. And I was doing, I forget how many hours a day of obsessive compulsive rituals trying to lessen my anxiety. She said, today I am none of those. I am not a PTSD survivor. I see that the past does not exist. I don't just see it in the intellect. I see it here, that the past does not exist except as a memory trace in my head. And it has no power in this moment over my peace of mind and joy. And I, as a result, I feel a love for my husband that is so powerful. I never thought I could love another human being this way, unconditionally. And my love that I feel for my children now, and my ability to receive love from my husband and to receive love from my children, let alone give it, is far beyond anything I could have dreamt in my wildest dreams. You know, there used to be an ad for Sports Illustrated they used to have years and years ago. And the person that would say it, he'd say, get your subscription to Sports Illustrated. And then this little guy would say, and in fact, you'll get this jacket, and you'll get the NFL schedule, and you'll get this, and you'll get that, and all these other things. Well, that's kind of the way it is with peace of mind. If you get peace of mind, you get all these other benefits. And Sid used to say, have you listened to those 3 Long Beach tapes that are free on the www? Well, even if you haven't, this is, but they're for free on www.3pgc.org. They're for free. Yeah. Okay. And they had finally, when he was 70 years old, they brought 100 people together to Long Beach, and because he had refused to talk to be videotaped. He said, I do not want followers. And we said, that's fine, Sid, me and other people, but you're going to die one of these days, and we need to have some videotapes. So he finally relented. And he says right there in those, he said, as you sit here these next 3 days, he said, it's important that you're not thinking about how this could help your spouse, your children, if you're a teacher, your students, if you're a therapist, be totally selfish in getting peace of mind for yourself, because that is the most loving and selfless thing you can do, is to be selfish about getting peace of mind. It's a paradox, but it's true, because he said, you can only give what you have. If you come to me and you need $20 and all I've got is 3 ones, that's all I can give you. And when you have peace of mind, you are connected directly to that spiritual source. And you know, you always are, but you know, as Harry has alluded to a number of times, that you are directly connected. In fact, that you are that energy in disguise. Then you've got infinite resources available to you in every moment of your life. Every moment of your life. You know, I do want to say one thing, and then I'll listen again, Harry, is even though I talked to Paul about getting rapport, if anybody reads Nicole's testimony, it's one of the few times I think in my life that I didn't get rapport. How many people, raise your hand, have heard that story of my first encounter with Nicole? I see a couple, 3. Okay. Well, 4. So I'm at West Virginia Medical School. The building where the psychiatric unit is a separate building on the same grounds. My office was in the Sydney Banks Institute, and later the West Virginia Initiative for Innate Health was in the proper building of the medical school. The nurse on the unit, I had covered for physicians at times and used Sydney Banks's missing link And he had seen some things that he referred to as miracles happen. So he was trusted enough by the doctors on the unit, on the adult unit, that they trusted him. So he could do things. Like he called me up and he said, Bill, Dr. Pettit, would you bring over 20 copies of The Missing Link? I said, sure, no problem. So I came over to the unit. I went up to the second floor. I got off the elevator and I looked down a counter, and about 15 feet from me on one side was the nurse on the left side. On the right side was this woman who was a nice looking lady, but it looked like she's had some really tough times. And she was Nicole, in her mid to late 30s now, 23rd hospitalization. And she's saying, why won't they just let me die? What is the problem here? I just want to die. And she's going on as I walk on there. Now, I'm not proud of this, but I'm not feel bad about it either, because I think I was moved by the Spirit. I found my mouth moving, Paul, and I had no idea what was going to come out of it. And I was kind of like, I mean, it was split second, but wait a minute, you don't know this person, you know, but it was too late. And what I said was, ma'am, whatever it is that you want to kill yourself over is over. She went on me like an injured cheetah, tiger, lion, you name it. And she started screaming at me and calling me names and saying, you don't know who I am, you don't know what I've experienced, you don't blah, 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 blah. And all of which was true. She said nothing that wasn't true. You have no right, you didn't, blah, blah, blah. You know, when you're wrong, you take the blows. You're like Ali on the ropes in Zaire, you know.
Right.
Oh, you just try to come out with as least damage as possible. Finally, her arms got tired, as did George Foreman's. She backed off a little bit, and I said, you know, I waited another 30 seconds to see if there were any aftershocks. I said, you know, what you just said is absolutely true. I want you to know that. But what I said is absolutely true also. And I know what you want. She said, you don't know what I want. I said, yeah, I do. You want to be at peace like the rest of us. But you've decided in your head, because of things you've experienced and things that you have done in response to what you've experienced, that that's impossible for you to have. And I know that it is very possible for you to have on an ongoing basis. And I put the books down and I walked out. I found out the next day that 10 seconds after I walked out the door, she said, how do I see that man when I get out of here?
Yeah.
Because the pilot light was still open or she wouldn't have been alive, but now a number of other burners of hope got awakened.
Yeah.
Where truth, because I touched that place of truth that resides in every one of our souls.
That is beautiful.
And that was a story that I didn't, I didn't get rapport. but I, you know, it's like the Spirit came through me. I was, as we always are, we're the lens that receives and gives the light. We're not the source of the light.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Oh. Thank you so much, and I'm conscious that this has been a lot of time on the call, so I just thank everybody for, you know, for the time. This is a tremendous gift to me personally. I'm so grateful that I'm here, and you know, for your time and attention on this.
Glad to have you here, Paul.
You know, I don't know.
So we have a couple of people with their hands raised.
Okay.
Tanya's been up for a little while. You
Sure.
are unmuted. Go ahead, Tanya.
Hey, long time no see.
Yeah.
So I had the label of PTSD for about 30 years, had probably symptoms for 40 years, and it's now been almost 2 years since I started looking into 3 Principles stuff. And I just actually wanted to say to Paul, as well. I do have a question for you, Bill, but Paul, I would say that I could still get symptoms or be symptomatic. For example, having my hand raised there for about 15 minutes, I could feel myself, the anxiety rising and rising as the longer it got. What I find now that I'm able to do is be aware that that's my thinking about having to wait to speak or being anxious to speak. And so while the symptom may still be there, it doesn't bother me as much. And what I wanted to ask you, Bill, is I will still get nightmares, for example, or I can still be triggered, and the recovery time is nothing. It's really easy. It's really not been a problem for 2 years. What I was always sort of told and what I read about PTSD was the neural pathways, and that you had learned that response and you kind of went straight into it. Now that I've had 2 years of pretty much not doing that, do you think these neural pathways stop that river downstream of being reactive, and that it just becomes second nature not to be?
Well, my understanding of neuroscience, first of all, to keep it simple, as Harry says it, Sid, we experience life, Tanya, one thought at a time. That's the only way we can experience life.
Yeah.
Now, every thought that we think is not conscious, right? So you often experience the feeling first, because your feelings are the dance of your thoughts through your limbic system. That's the missing link. The power of thought is spiritual. Through it, we either pull out old memories, or we have original thoughts that we create in the moment. But whatever the source, we experience it through the limbic system and back through our senses, and we experience it as a feeling. We are experiencing our thinking 100% of the time. And as long as I know that, as long as I really know that that's what I'm experiencing, I know when to leave my thinking alone. That's one thing. I know when to leave it alone. As soon as I lose a loving, lighthearted feeling, a joyful feeling, I have no business going to analysis to try to figure anything out. I'm 5 feet underwater with a 3-foot snorkel. And the last time I looked, that's a bad time to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And for me, looking to my thinking for the answer when I'm in anything but a lighthearted, joyful feeling is like taking a nice deep breath 5 feet underwater with a 3-foot snorkel. Now, in my experience in working with people with trauma, as they read Sid's books, I tell people, read every one of them through at least twice. Watch the tapes at least twice. No, wisdom will guide you. I mean, that's just my thought. So I tell people that don't even take that as a recommendation. I'm just saying that the more people deepen their understanding of these principles through the source material, my experience is that what happens is with those memories is that it has to be through the neuroplasticity, but it's the understanding, the insights that people have in the nature of these principles that changes the experience. It even changes the brain. So what people will tell me, I remember a young woman who had, after her mother died, her brother had sexually abused her for a number of years, and I could see it was too painful, and I had no need for her to talk about that. So she said, well, someday maybe I want to tell you more about that. And I said, that's fine. If you need to, I will listen if you want to. So she came in one day, and I thought, I could see the changes that had occurred into her. And I thought, today, if she wants to tell me more, I think she'd be able to do it. And she said, that memory that I've talked to you about, or the thing that happened, it's over. And what had happened is her insights into the nature of the three principles had deepened speaking in Star Trek terms, which my daughter is a Trekkie, my 31-year-old daughter is a Trekkie. Speaking in Star Trek terms, that force field just kept weakening and weakening and weakening. Every time she got quiet during a flashback and just let it go through without any, like a bad commercial on TV that you've seen 114 times, just let it pass. Every time that happened, the force field weakened, and as her understanding deepened, until the day came that when that memory came, it had absolutely no power, none. She said, I have no need to monitor what kind of TV shows I watch now, what topics I talk about, what books I read, because it has no power anymore. So all I could tell you is what I tell myself. If I experience emotional pain now, I get excited, Tanya. And people say, what do you mean you get excited? Because for 21 years, until I met Sid at the age of 41, I did not get excited when I had emotional pain, because I thought, oh my God, I'm headed for another clinical depression, which I had gone in and out of for 21 years. And so I'd start, oh my God, oh my God, I'm getting more, oh my God, I'm having more negative thoughts. Oh my God, I got to find a way not to. And of course, I'd end up down at the bottom, depressed, and say, see, I was right. Now, when I have emotional pain, I get excited. And the reason I get excited is because I know that the only person or thing that can cause me emotional pain is living in my underbritches right now. And the last I looked, there's only room for one of us. So if I am the cause, if I am using these beautiful, beautiful gifts that I'm made of, mind, thought, and consciousness, and that I use to experience life, if I'm using them innocently to create pain for myself, it speaks to that I've been given an opportunity to go through at least one, if not more, of those infinite doors of understanding that Sid used to talk about, that there's an infinite number of doors of insight into the understanding of these principles. And the last time I looked at my math book, that is a really, really big number. Again, that's supposed to be a joke, but I'm sorry.
And Tanya,
there's a lot of commas in that one.
So I'll just finish, Harry. I'll just finish. Is it okay? Yeah. So all I would say is that I get excited because I know if I have the courage and the hope, as he says, with hope and faith as beacons, you will always. And accepting where I am right now, and not saying I should know better, but being grateful for what I know, and allow my mind to get quiet every single time I have another insight that allows me to come back to peace. So to me, it's about enjoying the incredible journey. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been amazed over the 2 years how symptom-free I have been.
Sure.
And when I'm not symptom-free, it's not the same. I'm much more able to let it go. But I don't think anybody does that immediately for whatever's happening.
Yeah, we all have different experiences. Mine certainly have been incremental. Yeah.
Right. Good to know.
Well, I know you, when I talked to you a couple months ago, Bill, I wanted to reach through the screen and choke you when you said I was creating my own pain and suffering. But it was about a week later when I actually woke up with the insight where I saw how I was creating my own suffering. And it has completely changed my life. I mean, it's not that no suffering shows up anymore. It's that I realize where it's coming from now. And I can pretty much guarantee 99% of the time it's not because of what's going on. It's because of my expectations of what's going on. My expectations they're not being met. So I'm going to stomp my feet and I'm going to get upset. And expectations are a huge thing. And Tanya, if you're expecting to be completely symptom-free all the time, but then you have symptoms, well, now your expectations aren't being met. So not only do you have those symptoms, but now you also have that unmet expectation on top of it. I don't know if that rings true at all, but that's what I've seen for myself over the past few weeks here when things do crop back up. And it's amazing how much easier it is to let that stuff go now that I know exactly where it's coming from. I can't necessarily stop it from showing up. I don't know about you, Bill, and you, Harry, and anybody else on here, but I don't control which thoughts pop into my head.
True. Sid says that your brain is the computer. Your brain is a computer. Your mind is spiritual. So yeah, you're right. Whatever. It's just a matter of knowing that you have a free will of which ones you give attention to. And that's a powerful experience.
And how you relax with the feeling.
Absolutely, Harry.
It is. Well, we have 3 more hands up, and I'd like to try to get through them if that's okay. Oh, we don't have to quickly, but let's see. Jackie was the next one. Go ahead, Jackie, you're unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Dr. Pettit.
Hi.
I am, so I think I'm realizing that no matter how much I think I've been seeing that's new, underneath it all, there still is some belief that my fundamental state of being is hopelessness.
That you're broken or lacking in something.
Yes, and that I will always repeat patterns, no matter how much of a gap there may be between my downfalls. And what I'm hearing, but our personal histories are really just the story of where we've been,
Exactly.
not who we are.
Yeah,
and when we're going like, okay, so now, before the end of my life, I better this and I better that. So there's some meaning. That's just, it's like sticking pins in a map. I better go to South Dakota and I better go to Louisiana, because I better touch this point and this point. And it's just not, there's no real power in any of that. I never read the same book over and over again, but I go back to my own story when I don't even realize it.
Right.
It's about the more we can just be who we are. Well, the rest of it just kind of plays out however it plays out and that's not where the significance of living is.
That's true, Jackie. Is it okay to say something?
Please.
What it is being in the present moment with a light heart. I told this story in London. I said this lady in her mid-50s, we'll call her Nancy, she came in and she said, doctor, she's full of depression and anxiety, right? And she says, but what puzzles me, doctor, is when my grandchildren come over, they make me happy. For 2 hours, they make me happy. Now, Harry's known me for enough years to know that there was a reason why I got spanked over 100 times when I was a kid, and my brother, 3 years younger, never got spanked. And at family reunions, they asked my brother John, who's we have wonderful, they said, why did you never get spanked and Bill got spanked over 100 times? He said, well, it was not rocket science. I watched what Bill did and I didn't do it. Very simple, okay? So this lady, when she said that about her grandchildren, I looked at her, not sternly, but rather seriously. And I said, Nancy, that's really not fair. And she said, what do you mean, doctor? I said, it's not fair to blame your grandchildren. It's not their fault. And she said, what in the hell are you talking about? I said, well, it's not your grandchildren's fault that you're happy during the time that she's there. She said, what are you talking about? I said, the way I understand it, and I said, I'm not asking you to believe this. I'm asking you to just listen and see if it resonates. Whoever is behind our creation as human beings, it appears to me that it's made for us to have our default setting being loving, joyful, lighthearted. I see my new 2-month-old grandson. I've spent with my time in the Midwest with my 2-year-olds and 4-year-old twin grandchildren. And if you keep their bottom half empty and their tummy half full, they exude a beautiful, loving, joyful, lighthearted feeling. So I said, to me, we're made, that's inside of us. Sid said, happiness, people need to come to the realization, happiness is inside of you. But we have been given a free will. Metaphorically, we can cut off the channel so it doesn't fill us completely up. So I said, if we have a free will, we can pay attention to whatever thoughts we want to, and nobody can make us not do it. So innocently, you've been paying attention to all these thoughts of depression and anxiety, and you've been keeping this channel closed. But then your grandchildren come over, and you let those thoughts go for a little while, and you get present in your life.
That's great. That's great.
You get present in your life, and as soon as you get present in your life, the channel opens, you're filled up with a joyful, lighthearted, loving feeling, and you blame it on your grandchildren. And it's not their fault. And then they leave, and you get out of the present, back into paying attention to all your thoughts. The channel closes, your feeling goes away, and you blame it on your grandchildren leaving. Does that resonate?
Oh, God, yes, because that's a piece of it. There's certain things I have been convinced, and I haven't wanted to admit it, but I think they make me happy. I take pictures of horses, and it's always a joyful thing for me. And I think, well, it's the horses, it's the camera, but I'm present when
You're present. And my late wife, Sue, there's a book of poetry called Coming Home that I'm on the verge with Create Space. The only last things I have to do is to put a little biography of her and a description of the book. It's called Coming Home. It's a book of poetry, which she wrote in 70 pages of rhymed poetry over a 3-day weekend in 1984. After we had adopted our second little girl, and my wife was so filled with gratitude. And a poem I'm going to read to you, Coming Home, 8 lines. Coming home to peace and quiet. Coming home to feelings warm. Coming home where there's a fullness, where love in me is born. Coming home's a simple journey. It takes no movement on my part. Instead of listening to my thoughts, I listen with my heart. She used to say, Bill, I've just realized moment to moment in my life, I'm either in my life or I'm in my thoughts. Mm. And one is very joyful, even during difficult times, if I'm truly present. And the other is very stressful. That helpful?
Thank you very, very much. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That was really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Linda. You were next. You are unmuted. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pettit, for being here.
Where are you, Linda? Can I ask where you are?
Yeah, I'm in France. It's nighttime here.
Wonderful.
Probably in the dark.
Okay.
I have a couple questions that relate or tie together, I think.
Sure.
I have a stepson who was diagnosed in his early 20s with psychosis, and he's being very well taken care of in the system, so to speak, in Sweden. But he comes to visit from time to time, and I've talked to him. This is pre-principles, and he told me, he said, Linda, your coaching is not going to work on me. And so I said, okay, fine. But in January, I just became acquainted with the principles. I've totally immersed myself, and I haven't seen him since. But I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for somebody in Sweden. But also, I have a deep, deep, deep desire to help, to do this work and help people. And I'm wondering if you could also recommend some training. I heard you say to study Sid's work originally. But I would love I have coaching training, but just something to give me more of a framework or so, because I mean, this is just, this is it.
Well, I will tell you, Linda, there are a number of places to get, quote, training, and you can't train this. To me, we can't even teach it. All you can do is share what you see. I will tell you the most powerful school to me is in Salt Spring Island with Elsie Spittle and Chip Chipman.
Okay.
And if there's ever example of less being more, it's attending to their school. My wife and I, with all my 30 years experience, we went there in November of 2014. We went again to November of 2016. It starts on a Thursday evening, usually with a little get together, and then Friday there's a couple of short, maybe an hour and a half meetings. Saturday maybe they'll do the morning. Sometimes you have the afternoon off, and then you finish off Sunday morning, and you say, I'm going to travel all the way from France to Vancouver, British Columbia for that. Well, I tell you, it's like somebody walking in with, and this is not a perfect metaphor like most, because it's an illness model, and it's not that you're going to be walking in with any illness. But if I walk into my doctor's office, my family practitioners with walking pneumonia, and he gives me a shot of 80,000 units of penicillin G, I haven't spent very much time there. And when I walk out, I've still got walking pneumonia, but 72 hours later, I don't. So that's the strongest inoculation. When Sid on his deathbed said to Elsie and Harry, I think will verify this, that he said to Chip Chipman and Elsie Spittle, he said, of all the people that have listened to me, the two of you have heard more of what I've been trying to point to than anyone else. And I would like you to start this school and to do this school here on Salt Spring. And they do it every June and every November. Oh. And people, the last time I was there were people from Sweden, there were people from Taiwan, there were people from all over the world. And they limit the number, so it's not not hundreds and hundreds. I think they've kept it to maybe 60 or less. Harry, do you want to say anything? 75 now?
Yeah, I'd like to just, it's very, very important. There are a lot of teachers and excellent teachers, and many of the teachers have made this big, and I'll give them full credit for that. And they've been very, very strong psychologically. But Elsie and Chip were given the responsibility of maintaining the purity of the principles, much more important than the quantity of the principles. And they were also, in my mind, have helped me to reacquaint myself with my own spiritual identity. And that is what you want, is your own spiritual identity exploding inside of yourself. And that has been very powerful. And then the third thing is just what we have gotten a little bit from Bill, is they really bring Sid along. And so you'll actually get as close as you can get to listening to Sid Beggs in the feeling when he was in front of you. And that is a very, very beautiful thing. I can tell you it's a gift.
Well, I appreciate that. That's why I'm asking, is because I know there's a whole variety and a very large variety. And it's not that, I feel so deeply, and I just really, I want to get there. And coincidentally, I visit my family in California in November, so I think I might be able to work that in.
I would get on soon, because I suspect we're limiting it to 75. The other thing I'll say that may sound self-serving, but I'm excited that Linda and I, just moved here to Phoenix, and we're talking about the computer people and all those people, and we will be starting programs, the two of us. Many of them will be, to where people can, even from a distance online. And we will be starting programs, but to the best of our ability, they will be spiritually based programs. They're not going to be, we are retired psychologists and retired psychiatrists, and we are speaking spiritual truth and teaching, and that's all that we're teaching.
I totally hear that, and I am on board.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And the reason he's doing that is because that's where the power lies. That's where Sid was pointing towards.
Well, I like what you said, to know myself. I can't remember the words exactly, but I felt it very much in my
Yeah, we want to find it deeply for ourselves. And
yes.
But again, like back to what Paul said early, it doesn't mean that you keep your mouth shut until you think you know it, because we're never going to know it. Every 6 months after I first was exposed to this in 1983, every 6 months I thought, oh, now I understand the principles. And then 6 months later, I'd say, oh, what a fool I was. I didn't understand it, but now I do. And then 6 months later, I'd say, oh, now I do. You know, and people that, and innocently, God, we're so innocent. People, and I know Harry's, you'll hear people saying, I've been learning the principles for 15 years and I really understand them. But boy, I'm stressed a lot of the time. And boy, I spend a lot of time in emotional pain. And I want to go, you know, the first step for me is to have the humility to say, I don't know as much as I think I know.
That's so important.
I am so grateful for what I know. I'm so grateful for what I know. And I'll just finish quickly here because I want your comments. You know, on the chapter in wisdom and the missing link, people say, how do I find this wisdom? And Sid says, through gratitude. Through gratitude for what you have seen. That feeling, going back to Paul, seeing how powerful the feeling is and what Harry's talked about, that feeling of gratitude will carry you forward every single time to see more. It's in the feeling of gratitude that wisdom has easy access to us. Harry, thanks for letting me finish. Go ahead.
Oh, me? Oh, I was...
Yeah, I thought you had something to say. I apologize. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Bill is pointing towards is silence inside of ourselves. And that's where Sid was pointing towards. And Bill, Dr. Bob Sullivan and I are going to write a paper on healing, and the answer lies in the quiet chambers of mind as expressed by Sid Banks. And maybe we could send it when we got something. You could take a look at that as well.
I'd love to. Yeah.
But what I love about Bill is he's pointing towards the spiritual side of the principles. And I can only tell you in this room, that is where the real power is that side of it. And yes, of course, we have to live a happy life, so we have to understand about the psychological ramifications of the principles. But I can tell you that most of what I've learned psychologically is just let it go. And the rest of it just kind of takes care of itself if you have a spiritual root inside of you. And since everybody does.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my, this is like coming home. This is like the principles explain everything. I kind of innately, well, I guess we all know that, but you know, it's like, finally something that is outside that matches, that makes sense. And I'm just so grateful. So grateful.
You know, the one thing that I'd like to say, Harry, and I can say it shortly, is we haven't spoken about it, but certainly, and this is from somebody who had a family history on both sides of alcoholism, misused alcohol as a younger fella, never crossed the line into where I can't, you know, there was a major problem that could have been, but had a strong history on both sides, strong history of depression, including suicide on my mother's father's side, and thought that I was probably doomed to have these experiences. And I have had my problems with habits and stuff, but we all have. But I'm here to tell you that the alcohol misuse, the drug misuse, the gambling misuse, the cutting misuse, the hoarding misuse, the OCD rituals, none of those are the problem. They cause problems, but they are not the problem. They are the solution or solutions that people have come up with in an attempt to try to relieve their dis-ease, their internal dis-ease and pain. And if I could share one last story about that, Harry. I think I can do it in 2 or 3 minutes. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
So a
And
woman.
Then we do have one more hand up after that.
Okay, and that's fine. I'm in no hurry to leave, Craig.
Okay, good.
So this woman comes in and she weighs 455 pounds. And we'll call her Nancy. And I'm going through my thing. And at the beginning of my 90-minute interview, what I always said to people, and I do it whether I'm talking to somebody in Tel Aviv or Cape Town, South Africa, or Germany or France or Norway, or I say, at the end of this 90 minutes, there's 3 objectives that I have. And the first thing I have, rule is, not a rule, but I'd like to have agreement that you know that you're in charge, that you do not have to answer any question that I ask you. But if you do choose to answer it, that you be honest with me, because I'm giving you my word. I will never lie to you. And I'm asking that we give an agreement that we never lie to each other. And I said the most reason that people sometimes would tend to not tell the truth is that they're afraid of judgment. And I will tell you, I don't think you're going to experience any judgment from me, because I'm another human being, like my wife says, another bozo on the bus trying to find his way home.
She knows.
She knows. And just trying to find my way home. And so there's going to be no judgment, because I believe, as Sid talked about, and that's an issue for a whole nother hour sometime, on psychological innocence. That every human being, including ourselves, every moment of our life, given the choices we felt capable of making, we might have seen better choices, but given the actions that we felt at that moment able to make, we have done the best we have known every single instance in our life. And if you see that, not with a little s, but as Sid would say, with a capital S, resentment and guilt melt away like a snowball on June 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Or June 25th. Now, there was a point I was making and I got off track. So I was doing this thing that I do on the board, and I won't go into it. I'll just briefly. I say there's 3 things that happen when you start paying attention to negative thoughts. All kinds of biochemical dysregulation occurs. We do it in 3 minutes. We create a measurable biochemical dysregulation in our brain. 3 minutes of upsetting thinking. If you stop, then within 2 to 3 minutes, it comes back completely to normal. If you, in negative thinking, paying attention, activating the stress response, the fight or flight response for more than 30 minutes, you start turning off the wrong genes. Only 20% of the 25,000 genes we have are activated at any time. The other 20,000 are not even on. So things are not determined by our genes, they're determined by our state of mind. Okay? So I show this, and I show that as God has given us, or whoever made us has given us three levels, at least 3 levels of warning. If you get caught up in negative thinking, your mood will go down, your tension level will go up, and you will experience somewhere in your body pain, then sleep disturbance, and then memory problems. And you will create a powerful level of dis-ease. And once you experience that dis-ease, even though it's been innocent, it's trying to let you know that you're using these gifts in a way they aren't meant to be used. But if you don't know that, you will start to try to find something to relieve your dis-ease. For many, it's alcohol, drugs. I got to food. I hadn't even got to gambling or anger outbursts or hoarding or OCD rituals or any of those. I got to alcohol, drugs, and food, and she started sobbing uncontrollably. And she sobbed, and I pushed towards her a Kleenex and then sat back and gave her space. She sobbed for 7 to 10 minutes. And finally, she wiped her eyes. She started breathing normally, and I waited till I thought she was ready, and I said, Nancy, only if you feel comfortable sharing with me. Only if you feel comfortable. Do you mind sharing with me what just happened? And here's the shock, folks. She said, Dr. Pettit, I just had the most beautiful experience I have had in my entire life. And I said, really? What was it? She said, you've been talking about what happens when we give a lot of attention to our negative thinking. And you've talked about how we innocently create this dis-ease, and it's innocent. We're doing the best we know how. But then these things that people call diseases are not diseases. They're solutions that we've come up with to try to relieve our dis-ease. And I suddenly, when you went to alcohol, drugs, food, I suddenly felt total and unconditional love and compassion for my alcoholic parents, with whom I had been in judgment of my entire life. I felt unconditional love and compassion. And it was like 250 pounds of weight came off my shoulders in that instant. My life is changed forever from this moment on if I don't see another thing. Wow. Because she said, I saw that my parents and I were three beautiful human beings who had innocently created a tremendous amount of dis-ease with 12, 14 hours a day, 15 hours a day of giving attention to stressful thoughts. And then they went to alcohol to try to get relief, and I went to food. There was no difference. We were three beautiful people trying our best to find our way home.
Mm. Yes.
Wow.
That's powerful.
Seems a good place to call it, Greg.
Well,
I know we have another question, but
let's see what his question is first.
Okay.
It's Bob and Marty, so I know it'll be something good. So
no pressure, Bob.
yeah, no pressure at all. All right.
Hi,
You
Bill.
are
Good to
unmuted.
see you again. I just wanted to say for anybody on this call, last Thursday, Bill had a webinar on 3PGC, which was absolutely outstanding. So if you go to 3pgc.org and look on the webinars, you'll see that one on there. And the other thing is, I think, Bill, you said at the beginning of that you're going to start working on a book. And I can't think of anybody in the field right now that I would rather see write a book and what you're going to come up with. I'm sure you've got tremendous things to share, and with your emphasis on SID, which I think is missing in a lot of cases. I think that's absolutely wonderful, and you really clarified for me. A lot of people ask me, well, what's the best way I can learn about this? And I totally agree with you. Reading Sid's books and watching those videos, you can't really do much better than that. So thank you very much, and really appreciate what you've done and what you're doing.
Thank you, Bob. You know, Linda is going to be right along with me in the writing of that book, and there are now over 105 books written. You know, that's up to 105 on the principles, and with the One Thought. I don't know if you know Mara Gleason's One Thought debuts on the 29th, and there's over 105. There may be 110, but what I feel is, as a psychiatrist that's seen what some people would call miracles, and I would just say what's normal being activated. I think my hope is to write a book that makes it almost imperative that there's a national and international discussion about how we truly help people, and that the spiritual, we cannot deny that the spiritual aspect in the healing of people from whatever they've experienced. So, my hope is that we can do that. Even I plan on saying, even if it's 30 years after I die, that some young psychiatrist picked it up and says, "Holy cow, this needs to be looked at." Or a philanthropist. I was listening to Radio Lab on the way driving here for 2,000 miles, and I heard one man who sold his software to Google for $6.4 billion, saying those of us that have been fortunate enough to have made this kind of money have an obligation to stop the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. We have to. And I'm hoping that, and he said, we have to find a way to help the middle class and to help things. And what you hope is that some philanthropist like that will read that book or get directed to it, maybe because a son or a daughter or a grandchild has had trouble, and say, you know, I need to give these people 50 million of my 6.4 billion, build a hospital, and do the research and show what could happen if you had a whole hospital of people full of mental well-being, from the top to the bottom, from the housekeepers to the cooks to the nurses to the doctors to the receptionists. Miracles would happen, and it's going to happen somewhere.
Wow. Guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is amazing. Well, one last quick question for you, Bill, and then we'll wrap it up. Somebody asked how they can learn more about the program that you are developing.
Well, I would ask them to be patient. Linda and I literally, I not too wisely, I hesitate to do this. I drove 1,440 miles in 2 days. Not smart for a 75-year-old man. So in last 4 days, I've been resting a lot. And I've been answering emails from June 8th, So we're just getting moved in here. And, but I think our goal is we're starting our web, our people with the web and with the computer and stuff next week. I'm thinking by September 1st that we will have programs on our website that will be available.
And you can let us
know. So what
know.
is your website?
Yeah.
So people know.
That's, I suspect, is what, it's Three Principles Intervention, www. Three Principles Intervention, I would think. That shows, I don't look at websites. I don't even look at our own. We just had a frame of one, so there's very little right now. And I know that some people, I heard it at the meeting in London, some people are bothered by our word Three Principles Intervention. And I have no problem exploring that. I always get my Webster's Unabridged out. But the rationale behind that is that intervention is from two Latin words that means that something that comes in between something and changes it. And insights into the spiritual nature of man and these three spiritual principles changes everything. So that was the spirit from which that word came, Three Principles Intervention. The three principles just are, but insights into the spiritual nature of these three principles intervenes in your life in a glorious, glorious way. Takes you back home.
So true.
So Bill, with that, maybe in October, you brought up a topic, the spiritual nature of psychological innocence.
Okay.
It may be in October, if it fits into your schedule, you could pick a Sunday. We'd love to have you back with that particular topic because you brought it up yourself.
I would be more than happy to, Harry.
Okay, well,
let's exchange emails.
You let me know when it fits in October, and we'll love to have you. And that will give you enough time to catch your breath as well.
Okay. Well, Paul, I thought I was going to have a hard time today when the teleprompter broke, but I thought, well, what the hell? I'll just wing it, I always tell that joke when people come down, they say, do you have a transcript of the talk you just gave? I said, are you kidding me?
Yeah, you must be kidding. Yeah.
That was some great winging, Bill.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming on.
Just go have a nice life. Hi, Lynn McCright. I haven't seen you for a while. Nice to see you.
Yeah, this has been a real fun webinar, guys. Thank you very, very much.
Remember, life is way too important to take seriously, folks.
100%. Yeah.
Seriousness is the most underdiagnosed mental illness there is. Now, people tie it to responsibility, but I don't know about you. Every time I get into seriousness, I lose my compassion for myself, for other people. I lose my sense of humor. I lose my joy. I lose everything precious. So I remember life is way too important to take seriously. Lots of love to everybody.
Lots of love, guys. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to mute everybody if anybody wants to say goodbye or thank you or anything.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was excellent. Lovely.
Thursday, Jason.
Happy Sunday.
Next up Thursday.